My name is Austin.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
I mean, I really don't think there's too many crazy things to say, but born and raised in San Antonio, lived here all my life. Um, Fortunately for me, I was raised with both my parents, mother and father, still together to this day. Two brothers. I am the oldest of the three. Um, Currently 33, in case that makes a difference. But I mean, really started out pretty average. I lived one-story house with, of course, my parents. My first brother was born about 14 months after me, so a little under 2 years separation. So we lived in a one-story house over here. Not an amazing part of town, but I mean overall it was quaint, I guess, to say the least. But my parents did put both myself and my brother in a private like learning center. Of course, we weren't in school yet, and my dad day to day went out of his way to drive us over there. It was probably about at least 20 minutes from where we lived, and then he had to drive an additional probably like 10, 15 minutes to his work every morning. So he had to get up super early to try and get us there. So very fortunate in that aspect. Basically, they started teaching us very early on, read, write. Math, they taught. Still not amazing at it myself. My middle brother, however, he's really good at math. That's where I kind of found what my initial passion is with art. They had a little art classes and started doing that. Thought it was just for fun at first, but I found out that I really enjoyed it. So that was probably one of the earliest recollections of, I guess, a happy moment in childhood. Third brother was born, he's about 3 years younger than me. That's when my parents decided that we needed to move. Moved into the northeast side of town, so much better area than what we were. Two-story house over there. Again, nothing crazy, middle class style. Started going to school, so moved over to elementary. Went to two different elementary schools over there. An older one that was already there, brand new one got built. So we got to, be in a brand new school. It's kind of cool. Once middle school hit, decided to kind of break away from the area that we were at. I went to a magnet program, specializing in aviation. So rocketry, when they say it's not rocket scientists or rocket science, that kind of irritates me sometimes because technically I did study rocketry. But then had the opportunity to move forward there, decided not to, went back to normal high school. Played sports all my life, soccer player, all three of us played soccer. Fortunately, me and my middle brother got to play on the same team pretty much all of our lives, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, that was pretty much standard childhood in my opinion anyway.
What were your dreams as a kid?
Really, it was, of course, like every kid, once I learned sports, dreamed to be a pro. Learned pretty early on. It was a lot of work to try and do. My dad was 100% backing. He was a coach for myself and my brothers since I was 5. My mom, extremely supportive. She didn't really drive, so that kind of made things a little bit harder. But we were always out at the fields probably 4 times a week at least. And then, of course, games on the weekends. We went to tournaments up and down Texas. Later on, eventually the United States. We played Florida. You name it, we probably played there. But yeah, that was kind of my initial aspiration. It wasn't until probably high school that kind of died out, realizing, not really there. But I wanted to be an architect, really. Again, had a passion for art, but then again, reality struck, realized that's a lot of math, was not good at math, so it just didn't work out. But I mean, overall, moved into graphic design, so I guess pretty close to my initial dream. So.
Could you tell us about just your general relationship with your dad, and then how that relationship with him like felt for you?
Yeah, my dad, I think he's a great man. He raised us pretty strict. He was Marine Corps, so and then of course his dad was Army. So from his early days, he was raised very strict. So it kind of pushed over to us. His rules were kind of simple. Just follow them and we're fine. So, but I mean, my relationship, again, he coached us throughout. He was always there. So, I mean, to this day, very good. I mean, we just hung out this morning. So, yeah, overall.
How does that feel for you overall?
I mean, very blessed. I had a lot of people close to me, especially playing sports early on, where they had to go through divorces or their dads passed away, or either side of the parents. So yeah, very, very. I feel blessed to be able to say, even to this day, that they're still together and still in my life. So.
What about your relationship with your mom and how that felt?
I mean, same thing. She's always been there. Now, she wasn't as strict per se, but she was the fighter. Anything in our lives, say school, was kind of treating us incorrectly, or even my dad, she was the one to always stick up for myself and my brothers. Taught us kind of to fight for ourselves as well. So, yeah, I think in my life, probably the strongest woman I've ever met. So.
How did that look like, her teaching you how to fight for yourself? What exactly did that look like in those lessons?
Hard to really put into words, but overall, just being able to, she never really fought on her own for us. She always sat down with us, explained what she was doing. If, say, even writing it out, that way we would know exactly kind of the steps to take to fight for what we thought was right. Yeah, so she never really hid anything as far as that from us. And she was making sure that we were involved in it as well. So I think that's probably the way she taught us.
Involved in it, how so? Like what exactly?
So, I mean, just making sure that we were able to see the fight itself. I mean, fight's a strong word, but even if it was just a discussion with, say, a principal or a teacher, okay. We were always sitting in. We weren't shut out. I know a lot of parents or schools want kids to sit outside of the office or whatever. She wasn't like that. She wanted us to be part of it, to be able to hear. So
she taught you, she had y'all present when there's discussions, issues, things to be settled, and then she
Correct.
Taught y'all a way to do it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and making sure we had grounds to stand on. If we went in without any preparation, we were kind of in the wrong. We kind of deserved to lose a fight if we lost. Yeah. But yeah, it was always a discussion. Of course, sometimes things got heated. She's very passionate, so yeah, she could get loud, but overall, her heart's always in the right place, and she just kind of taught us to make sure that we had the grounds to stand on, means to fight, and stand up for what we thought was right.
What are the biggest things that you learned from both your parents?
I don't know. I guess say that, making sure that we were open to discussion, open to learn, constantly learning. Both of them always encouraged us to, if we heard something, to go research it ourselves, whether it be in school, church. We weren't huge going to church, but we did every once in a while. My parents aren't extremely religious, but they are believers. But they always encourage not to just listen to what someone said, make sure that we go find out on our own. And if we ever had any additional questions, to ask the proper people, just, be, I guess, smart about it, which seems kind of weird today. People just don't tend to do that anymore. But yeah, trying to use as much common sense as we possibly could. Of course, what we think is common sense, that's an opinion word, but yeah, and you know, stick up for each other as well. Me and my brothers are also really close, and we've always, being in the same age category, they always encouraged us to, you know, make sure that we were there for each other rather than friends or whatever. It's another thing my dad really explained to us, is that if we're lucky to leave life with one, maybe two friends, really good friends, we're very blessed. That people come and go. Most people don't have your best interests in heart, but if you do come across those one or two friends, you're doing really well. So.
Could you tell us about your first love? It's whatever you associate as your first love. It could be a person, place, hobby, and how that felt.
Ooh, that one's a tough one. I think as far as my first experience with truly loving something, again, was art. Found that by accident. Mostly, of course, all kids do coloring books and stuff. But in that kind of pre-K style school, they were doing a little bit more working with clay and paints and stuff. So kind of found a passion in that. Found out I was good. So, or at least I thought I was good. So that really drove something to be able to continue with it. I stopped there for a little while, but very quickly found it again. So.
Could you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak? Same thing, whatever you associate as your first loss or heartbreak, and how that felt.
So I think, I don't know if it was the first or not, but one of the hardest ones that I went through was going back to the friendship thing. I had a really close friend in elementary school. Me and him did everything together. If I wasn't at his house, he was at my house, and vice versa. But going through elementary, again, middle school, I decided to go into that magnet program. He didn't. So he went through the school that I was supposed to go to. Became extremely popular in there. And of course, me being out of it for 3 years, we kind of drifted apart a little bit. We played soccer together as well, and he was always part of my team, but I started noticing throughout middle school, he started like talking to me less and less. When it came down to high school, I decided to go back to the high school that we were supposed to go to. And by then he was already everybody knew who he was. And basically he just completely cut me out. And I think that was probably one of the hardest moments for me, even though my dad has always told us that could happen. It was completely different experiencing it. So.
How'd that feel? Like, run through the emotions. In the moment, like, what was the thought process? You know, looking back, we know those things happen, but when you're in it, those things do hurt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that was it. It was pain, heartache. I had felt a little lonely, I think, before then, but the loneliness just absolutely hit hard, being that we went from, again, doing everything together to nothing. And it was stretched out a little bit, but it was pretty abrupt. It was definitely tough. Fortunately, being that my brothers were the same age, I don't think it hit me as hard as it could have if I didn't at least have them to fall back on.
How was it dealing with that? So you would see them at school, right?
Yeah. The school was fairly large, so we didn't have any of the same classes together. We both still played soccer, so other than seeing each other after school for practices or before school for practices, but it wasn't, we didn't hate each other. Even to this day, we could talk today and be perfectly fine. But it was just, kind of like a wall. We just didn't acknowledge. That was pretty much it. Yeah, and I don't think to this day either one of us really tried mending anything. So.
Who would you say first taught you love and how?
I'd say probably my mom. And I guess just going through, you get in trouble as kids, and just being able to express that it was okay and that she would love us regardless. I guess that was my first experience in what I would consider love, as far as like unconditional kind of thing. Like it didn't matter what we did. I mean, to an extent, she couldn't necessarily back what we did, but she'd love us regardless. I think that was it. And especially contrast to my dad being Marine Corps, he had a lot harder time showing us that he was always there for us, but it was a lot harder time to, I guess, express how he was feeling. So.
How did that feel?
My dad?
Both.
So of course my mom, it was amazing being able to, know that you always have someone who has your back, regardless. So that, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any feeling like it. But my dad, again, I love my dad, and I know he loves us as well. But yeah, he's always had a harder time showing it, which my mom always made it kind of a priority to make sure that we didn't do that. So once we had kids, we could, express how we were, or felt. But yeah, he's definitely gotten better over the years. As he got older, of course, he's been through a lot. He's seen some of his acquaintances or friends lose their kids, and yeah, that's opened him up a lot to be able to, I guess, grow in that area. But yeah, it was a little harder when we were younger. Not necessarily knowing how he felt. But I mean, now that we're older, we can kind of see at least where his heart was. So.
What's love to you? How do you describe love?
I mean, of course, there's a lot of different versions of love. But to me, it's kind of like my mom, always being there for a person regardless, having unconditional, well, I can't really use love to describe love, but an unconditional passion for the person or people, to, be there. It's kind of hard to explain, but I don't know. It's unconditional, I guess, is the best way to say it. Yeah, it's one thing, of course, physicality in love, that's important. There's a lot of small factors, but always being there regardless, that's probably it.
Always feeling that somebody's there.
Exactly.
What's a good day look like for you?
Good day. Being able to be around people that I care about, relaxing, not having too much to worry about. That's always a good one. I enjoy food a lot, so having a nice meal or something, and then gaming. Absolutely love gaming. To me, it relaxes me. So yeah, I think being able to do something that's relaxing, taking stress away, I think that's definitely a good day.
What's a bad day look like for you?
Ooh, the bad days are when I get in my own head. I'm a perfectionist, but I'm also kind of lazy. One of my downfalls. So those two conflict a lot. So even something like art, at this point, not necessarily a career for me, but it's passion. So, but I could spend days on a project and that passes. A month goes by, I look back at it, and it's never finished. So that's always frustrating. But worst days for me are when I feel like no one is there for me. That is probably the hardest thing. More recently, I moved out on my own. I've basically, my parents taught me about saving money, so stretch that out as long as possible. But I'm sure we'll discuss it a little bit. But I was engaged for a little while. High school sweetheart. So we had a lot of plans going forward. That's when I was deciding to save most of my money. So I was living at my parents' house for a long time. Once we split, didn't really have a reason to move out, so just stayed there. But this past year, decided to move out. In that, though, I wasn't anticipating that those days became harder. Before, if I was feeling a bit lonely, I could always just walk downstairs, talk to whoever I needed to. Now, not as much. And of course, there's always phones or whatever. They're not that far. I could always drive, but it's just not the same. So those days have definitely become a little bit harder. Fortunately for me, I think I'm growing a bit in that area. So last year was extremely hard for me, especially around holiday season. But this past holiday, I think I did pretty well. Yeah.
Are there some things you do to get through those bad days or those down days, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Pretty much anything to take my mind off of it, to get out of my own head. So of course, like I said, gaming, that's a huge thing for me. If I could get a couple people that I lean on, either my brothers or my best friend, to hop on for a little while, maybe discuss it a little bit on there, but just vibe with the game. Yeah. Rocket League is probably it's a very simple game, but it's relatable for me. It's car soccer, if you don't know what that is. So of course, me playing soccer all my life, it's a very fast-paced game, but it doesn't take any real effort per se. Yeah. So yeah, it's just something I could just have fun doing.
What's a person or an event that's shaped you, good or bad?
I don't know how much personally I've let people shape me, but in high school, I guess was probably one of the most standout moments. My soccer coach, of course, again, I played soccer all my life. The team that we had at the time, we were a championship team. We were winning every year. Tournaments at one point, of course, this is kind of sounds conceited, but at one point we got to the level where the people that were running the tournaments, they weren't even anticipating us to lose. So of course, tournaments, you have to pay a fee to get in. They were they were just telling us to keep it. If you lose, pay us at the end, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, we were good. The team was basically my high school team. That same team. The coach that coached us in high school, he was a football coach. So when he got us, all he had to do was put us in. He didn't. He sat me. Unfortunately, I was a bench warmer for at least a year and a half of my varsity. And then that was extremely hard for me. I'd always been a starter for the regular team that I played on, or the club team that I played on. So it was something that I wasn't used to. My teammates that were there in my club team, same teammates that were in high school, basically started treating me like I was a bench warmer. And that was something that really, at first, hurt, but later on gave me a bigger drive. I was the only one out of that team to end up playing college soccer. And I think that was part of it. It drove me to push. And I think that's probably something that I guess shaped me the most, is I've, from that point on, always found a way to push past whatever was trying to, I guess, hold me down. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I've gotten at least to the point that I'm at now. Have a college degree, pretty stable job, well, very stable job, and still being able to work on my passion projects on the side. That's something that I think pushed me to that.
What about I played high school ball, and
Yeah.
you know it's fun, but I do think that you learn a lot of life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
You learn about work ethic. You learn
Yeah.
about putting it all on the field. You learn about sweating
Yeah.
and hurting, and then getting that payoff, right?
Absolutely.
And the payoff is getting to play.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you know, that's how it is in life, right? Like, you know, to find that sweet spot where you're able to transfer what you learn playing sports and be like, oh, I can use this shit for life.
Exactly.
And the payoff is like getting to do what you love, getting to work on your passion project. But I know for me, it was very hard to make that transition.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
So how was it when you were able, like, to use that to push you, and then to use those same skills you learned? Were you able to kind of seek to make that equation and see it in your head, or was it more like naturally occurring?
It was more naturally occurring. It wasn't like a flip of the switch kind of moment, which I know happens a lot. Yeah. But no, for me, it was more of a dragged out process. I took bits and pieces day to day of kind of what was happening, what was going on around me, and being more, I guess, cognitive. Like, I paid attention a lot more. But yeah, it was more of a drawn out process. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. So even to this day, I'm still learning a lot from not so much that situation, but situations that continue to arise. So.
What inspires you?
That one's really hard. So like I said, I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I want to be the best at whatever it is that I'm doing. Problem is art is very subjective. So being the best to myself, that would probably be my most inspirational thing. Trying to prove to myself that I've mastered what I've set out to master. So I think that's kind of what drives me day to day. But I don't know if there's one in particular thing that truly inspires me to move forward. It's more little pieces.
Any of your work and felt like, man, I did that?
Yes. Yeah. There's been a few things that I've done that, it definitely surprised me, or I figured out that I could push myself to a new level. But yeah, and me being a little bit on the lazier side, sometimes I don't practice enough to keep that going. So that's where I have to, I think I drive to be better.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
I think that high school experience was probably one of the most humbling ones for me. Myself, or my entire family, we're extremely competitive. My youngest brother is probably the cockiest out of all of us, and probably rightfully so. I don't think he'll ever see this video, so we'll be okay. He's good. He's good at whatever he touches. He's an electrical engineer now. It comes easy to him. Soccer. Basically the people around him always called him Little Messi. I don't know if y'all know who Lionel Messi is, but yeah, he's good. He's always been good. Whatever he does, he'll do it perfectly. But yeah, that's what was the question again?
What's been a humbling experience for you?
Yeah, so pushing that, we were always, I guess, fighting with each other to see who was the best. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a big head sometimes. Not necessarily being the best among us, but that drive always made us a little bit better than most of the other people around us. And being pushed down to the bench, it was it was tough, but humbling to say the least. It definitely brought a new light that I could always be better. There's always improvement to be had, and you just got to sit down and figure it out.
So for this next question, if you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war?
I mean, fortunately for me, I guess, standard thought of war I was never a part of. Of course, I've in an age where like 9/11 happened, so the Iraq war was happening around me. But fortunately, I was never really involved in it per se. I guess the closest thing to war for me has been mentally, fighting amongst myself. I'm probably my own worst critic. And on the bad days, those are probably the most, I guess, war mentally that I go in with myself. Now, of course, being in sports, that was always wartime. That's always how I've looked at it. Just going in with your team or squad and being able to, fight common goal kind of thing. So I think fortunately I've never really had too much experience with the definition of war, but those are probably two of the things that I would associate most.
When you talk about the mental war, right,
Mm-hmm.
the war with yourself, how do you fight that war? Do you ever win that war? Can that war ever be won?
I don't think there is really ever a winning to that war. It's a constant battle. It's just winning bits and pieces of it. So being able to overcome that day, taking it step by step, maybe even overcoming a minute or an hour, getting out of your own head to be able to focus on the big picture. I learned this kind of early in life that we're just small specks. Everyone has their own life to live, and what I do with my life will only affect a finite number of people. So I really have to, day to day, fighting those battles within my head, make sure that I'm bettering myself to better the finite people around me. And I think that's probably my biggest goal in life is to, if I can really just help one, maybe two people, that's perfect for me. But in order to do that, I have to, win my own battles within myself. So.
Do you find peace in being finite?
Yes and no. When I really think about it, it does sometimes make things easier, but at the same time, it kind of makes you question, like, if I'm really that finite, what's the point? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, if you will, and it does sometimes make things worse for wear. But overall, I think in the long run, it's made me realize that sometimes the decisions when I think are really bad may not be as bad as I really thought they were. The mistakes I've made in the past, now looking back, maybe they really didn't do that much. That kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think I've been finding peace and being finite as of late. Like, I'm in my head all the time too.
Yeah. That's a tough place to be.
I get to do this. I'm like, finally. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But knowing how small and significant at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm able to catch a breath. Like, it's not that serious. However, it is significant to me.
Yeah.
And like you said, to those one or two or three closest people by you that you have the most influence over, like, that's how it ripples across.
Exactly.
So, I've been finding peace in that lately. Thanks for sharing that. So the next same type of question, if you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you can relate to the word peace?
I don't think there's necessarily a specific moment. I just don't remember exactly when I realized that kind of finite mentality. I want to say I was younger when it happened, but I don't know for sure. But whenever it happened, it's only grown since then. So being able to, focus on that to overcome my day-to-day mentalities, I think more often than not now allows me to find peace. So I don't know exactly when it happened, but whenever it did, I'm glad it did.
Being finite and meaningful at the same time, right? Like the significance and smallness. But man, the smallness is like, hey, I'm free to move. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I can make mistakes, and move forward.
Yeah, it does make things a lot less permanent.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's a little comforting.
So the next question, if you could tell us about a truly difficult time in your life and how that felt and how you endured.
Yeah, I think one of the most recent ones was the split from my fiance. That was probably, so like I said, we were high school sweethearts. I think that was the first time I felt love outside of my own family. Of course, there's been other girls in the past, but I think that was the first time that I actually had enough of a connection to where I thought it was love. And unfortunately, she decided to make a few bad decisions. But that was a very tough time. Now, we split for a little while before we were engaged, but worked things out. I was with her for almost 10 years. And when we finally ended it, of course, all her decision, that one was extremely tough. That was probably the most lonely I've ever felt in my life. And of course, being that kind of relationship for so long, you spend tons of time together. So it was coming to the point where I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with myself. I don't, to this day, really have too many friends. So it wasn't, and at that time, my best friend, he was living in, actually he just moved back to New Braunfels, so that made it a little bit easier, so I could go up and visit him, stay there for a night or whatever if I needed to. But everything around me had memories. Everything. From the car that I drove to, of course, hanging out at our house. She only lived like 3 minutes away from me. So driving Bassett Street on the way to work or whatever, that was tough. Ultimately, in order to kind of overcome it, it kind of went back to the finite thing. Just being able to realize that I'm still relatively young. There will be other opportunities to find whatever it is love has in store for me. And of course, my family, they were really big help, especially my mom. My mom, which I don't know how she did it because they were extremely close as well. Basically, she became her daughter. And that was extremely tough. But my mom she was very strong in that situation. So she helped me through a lot.
Yeah, breakups are tough,
Yeah.
especially the long ones, or when you love somebody. And it's a process, right? It's a journey. Jeez.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you living kind of own your life.
Yeah.
You lived a certain way for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then you take the primary component.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, y'all basically built everything around each other.
Yeah.
And it was, everything was intertwined. The people that we hung out with, we both hung out with them. Places that we went. It kind of helped a little. She ended up moving away. So that kind of helped a little. But again, still, the memories for me were still there. Driving past whatever street she had lived on, or seeing, like, if I ended up coming across something she left in my house. Those kind of days were really tough.
And where are you at now? How's the movement forward now?
So, I mean, don't have anyone currently, so that's not necessarily good or bad. But some of the days I haven't necessarily figured out how to overcome that loneliness that it kind of left. But overall, I think myself as an individual learned a lot from the situations that we lived through together and, of course, separate. But I think that's really what helped me get over most of it, is realizing that I've grown as an individual, being able to truly, not have to rely on anybody. I can just be me and be perfectly content. Not necessarily to my most extreme happiness, but I can be happy. But I mean, eventually, yeah, absolutely. I think everybody, and if they say otherwise, I think they're kind of lying to themselves, wants to be able to share what they have with another person. Yeah. And, have that other person share what they have, kind of thing. I don't think anyone wants to go through life walking into an empty house or an empty apartment or whatever and, just being cool with it. I think eventually they want someone, maybe not an entire family, but myself, I always wanted kids. So being now that I've gotten past that, I guess, date that I kind of had planned, it hits a little differently. But now that I've kind of focused on myself for a while, it's definitely easier now. Actually, quite a bit easier. But even to talk about it before, I guess the tissues would have come in handy. Yeah, before that, it crushed me. Yeah, absolutely. But now, I mean, it's a learning experience. I'm extremely disappointed in the way that she handled the situation. Myself, yeah, throughout our relationship, I go back and think about it. I could have done things a little bit better, but we were both young. We'd learn. But we were learning together, and that's what we always at least discussed, or on my side, I always discussed, we're learning together. Either we continue learning together or we don't. But I guess at some point she decided that that's not what she wanted. But yeah, just moving forward, I always have to have an open mind, learn from pretty much any situation that I find myself in, and keep my eyes open.
Do you find yourself like, as far as working on your passion and your art, that has been a very good outlet?
Yes and no. So that was kind of another weird situation within that situation, is that she was also an artist. We both went to the same high school. I left to college, I think, a year before she did. We ended up at the same school and both art majors. So yeah, for a while there, that's when I kind of took my break and kind of lost passion for it for a little while. Is that like me going back and doing that art day in and day out like I was doing before we split, it was just hard to focus. It was hard to, continue the same style, because at that point I kind of developed my style around what I was doing. Yeah, and at this point I think art has definitely found its way back, and it's definitely something that I can find passion in again. But for a while, no, it did not help.
What's one of the happiest moments in your life?
I mean, my life hasn't really been that bad, so I mean, hard to find one in particular. I guess nothing really like stands out per se as far as one happy moment. It's just smaller happy moments, just like I was really the first one in my family to graduate college. So that was a very happy moment for myself, and I was able to share it with my family. When I got engaged, that was another a big one for me. I've always been the individual. I've never really dated around. Once I committed to something, I was committed. So I thought that was a big step in my life. And I mean, even getting through something like high school was not great for me. But overall, just being able to complete it and not really have any like negative things go with me to college. But yeah, and then being able to continue in my career, I've hit milestones monetarily. My dad, specifically, both my parents, have always taught us to be responsible, especially with finances. Being able to basically have set aside at least a year's worth of bank account, I guess, to be able to live off of in case there's a rainy day. So, I mean, like when this pandemic hit, none of us knew what was going on. So fortunately, I didn't have to stress out that much because, again, my dad always told me to do it. So I did it. Yeah, I had enough to be able to survive. So that's always been a kind of a proud moment for me, is when I hit last year, I hit that monetary goal that I had wanted to hit. So that was, but I think it's more small, happy moments, more so than big ones. My youngest brother just got married this last October. That was one of the hardest but also happiest moments that I think that I felt. He's very similar to my dad in the sense that has a hard time kind of sharing his feelings unless you really try hard to dig it out of him. But just like when he was talking or doing his speeches throughout, I never knew he was that articulate. I didn't ever know he could share like that. And I think that was not necessarily happy for me, but just being happy for him, being able to find that person that he can really, be himself and be in love. So, but I think that actually this past holiday season, maybe looking back at it right now, maybe that's one of the reasons that I had an easier time with it. It was kind of a hopeful moment. So maybe not happiness for me, but hope. That's kind of a happy thing.
Hope is beautiful.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
I think the thing that when I stay up, it's the loneliness. I think that's the hardest thing for me. As an individual, again, I spent so much time building my life, a third of my life, around a certain individual, which I'd felt lonely in the past, but never like that once we split. That's when it really happened. And I mean, that's really the only thing. Sometimes I stress over some smaller things that may keep me up. Like, yes, I do have enough set aside for a rainy day, but maybe I want to buy some extra things, or want to go on vacation. Family's going to Florida or something, and I'll stress out about, can I afford it, that kind of thing. But I think the lonely mentality of it, I've, especially when it came to relationship wise, I had kind of ideas of what I wanted to be. My dad was 27 when he had me. So I kind of felt like that was a good age to have my first kid. And me being engaged when I was right on path. So when that didn't happen, 27 passed and 28 passed and 30 hit and still nothing. Those kind of questions, like, will it ever happen? Those just drive home that lonely feeling for me. And I think that's probably the main thing that would keep me up at night, if anything.
How do you work through that? Because I have those questions myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people do. It's just whether or not they're willing to admit it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there really is a solution for it. Yeah, I mean, if I find myself in that. I'll try and throw on like YouTube or something like by my bedside. Maybe, well, music is a hard one for me as well. I absolutely love music. I wish I could play instruments. That would be amazing. But I absolutely love music, all kinds of music except for country. Not a big country fan. But one of the biggest issues with music for me is that myself and my fiance, we all love the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So even like some of the bands that I would still listen to today, let me make it worse.
Make a whole new
Yeah,
playlist.
yeah. But yeah, it's just trying to find things that, just kind of make your mind blank. Like, not a huge reader, but graphic novels.
But what about the hope? The hope that things do get better, that things to substitute that feeling of loneliness, or maybe things you do to keep yourself company and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think those are harder to do when I find myself just like trying to go to sleep, to really dwell on those. I think, unfortunately, the way humans' brains work, it's so much easier to focus on the negative than the positive, which is, of course, terrible stance, but I have no proof that it's the other way around. So yeah, trying to dwell on hope, it hasn't really worked for me. Trying to fall asleep, it's more just like if I'm just not trying to think about anything, I think that tends to work a little bit better.
What keeps you going every day?
The drive to better myself. That's it. I don't know. I mean, of course, day to day, I'd love to think that I've bettered someone's life in passing. A lot of people have come through my life and left. But to this day, I don't know for sure that I've served my purpose to be able to really say that, yes, I absolutely made at least one person's life better. And I think that's really what drives me to continuously learn and try and, just like this, if someone has a question for me, I want to be an open book. I want to be able to share my experiences, whether or not if I think they're small, which I think most people tend to think that their experiences are pretty small. But maybe it's something that they absolutely needed to hear. I think that's kind of what drives me to keep going day to day. And then, of course, my mom absolutely. I feel like this is something else that if someone says that they've never contemplated, they're lying. But suicide, I think at some point, everyone has at least thought about it. But I think as I've progressed in life, I realized how selfish it was. And the only reason I realized that is because of my mom. I can never do that because of her. Just knowing that I've taken a piece of someone else's and destroyed it, that's another, not necessarily a positive driving factor, but it is something that drives me to keep going and never give up on at least making myself a little bit better each day.
What about yourself? What about life being worth living just to live it, just to experience it?
I don't think I've really ever thought that way. Experiences are great, but I always wanted to believe that there's some sort of purpose for me being here. I have to have some reason to exist. If not, just living, it's probably fun. I mean, in that mentality, I think that I could convince myself to, have that extra 2 a.m. party instead of, going to work the next morning kind of thing. I think that's kind of a dangerous mentality in most cases. But yeah, I think in that sense, that could drive someone to really, not end life. But no, not for me. I think it's the trying to find that purpose in life. And it could be all the way until my deathbed to really know that I fulfilled it. So I just think that being able to, focus on that is driving me to better myself each day. And that's kind of a goal for me, is that if I'm just a little bit better each day, that's good enough.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
I think the biggest regret, I don't even know if it's one specific regret, but something that I found myself, even to this day, personality-wise, I have a very hard time telling people how I feel about a situation or about the other person, because I'm worried about the outcome. I think that's probably my biggest regrets in life, is those small factors, whether it be even asking a girl out. I was always worried about, what if she said no, instead of, just going for it. And to this day, I still find myself having those questions within myself and stopping me from maybe even doing things that could be potentially amazing. I think those are my biggest regrets. And I think that I don't know if I'll ever truly be past it. I think I've gotten a little bit better, but it's just something in my personality that I don't know if I'll ever overcome. I think that'll probably be my biggest regret on my deathbed, not being able to, just come out and tell people how I feel.
You're alive and well. You're gonna make it. With those regrets that you just stated, do you feel that you can make amends with those, change those, or be at peace with those?
I definitely can't change them. Unfortunately, with that kind of personality trait, once that opportunity's passed, I'd say 9 times out of 10, that opportunity's gone. If I overcame whatever death situation I was in, and really focused on it, maybe I could at least change it to where I wouldn't regret it when I actually pass.
No, meaning right now, like hypothetically.
Right now?
Sitting here in that chair.
Yeah.
And we just projected into the future, right? Or actually in a different scenario.
Okay.
Currently, like we would be in that hospital. Like right now, you're dying right now.
Mm-hmm.
What are your regrets right now? And you just said not going for it.
Yeah.
But right now, you're alive. Could you go for it moving forward?
I think I have to be honest. I don't know if I could. I don't.
Better than no.
Yeah. I mean, again, as part of my goal with my own life is being better each day. I think that's something that I've worked on, and I've gotten better over the years. I've taken more chances than I definitely would have even back in my college days. But yeah, I'm more of a practical thinker. So I think that's always going to be something that kind of stops me. I'm always going to overthink what it is. Sometimes I just can't turn off my brain, So I don't know if me being on my deathbed will really change it to the point where it'll disappear, but maybe it'll get a little bit better. And I think even as I leave today, maybe my focus on tomorrow will just be make it a little bit better.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
I mean, ultimately, I've been working on it for a while, and technically I do own my own company, but I've always wanted, once I realized those childhood dreams were kind of iffy, my more recent dreams have been being able to own my own company in a more arts-focused situation, whether it be graphics or media or anything like that, and being able to build a team under me, and really have a common focus on it, and be successful with it. Whether or not that success is again just being able to make it my livelihood, not necessarily being a millionaire or whatever. That would be nice, but being able to not have to work for somebody else. I hate having to answer to people. So, being able to have my own thinking, have my own brand, being able to push that, and I think that's probably my biggest goal right now.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your picture perfect ending? And it's not necessarily the end. It's just envisioning if it was a book or a movie. Like what's that scene look like for you?
I think that scene is probably finding that person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, and having a glimpse of that family that we're going to start, and me being able to not have to worry about what's going to happen next day. I think that's it. I mean, if I can be able to take care of my family without having to worry, that's it. That's my perfect. Yeah, I think that's it.